Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another video. Today we're going to be talking about in-game leading at the open level. This is kind of a very general overview and a very good foundation for anyone who is interested in starting to IGL to kind of have an idea of where to start in order to get a team rolling. This comes from a viewer request. Someone messaged me and they're like, hey, can you break it down? Just kind of everything that you've looked at from your experience. So this is from my experience as an in-game leader. This is from watching interviews and talking to other similar level in-game leaders, such as myself. So let's just dive right into it. The first thing you want to figure out is, what is your goal? Because your goals should direct how much time and effort you want to put into the game. Because if you're wanting to play the game for fun with some friends, or your face at 5-stack, the amount of effort and how hard you're going to try is going to be quite different from if you wanted to play seriously and you wanted to move up to the ESEA ranks to make like ECL or ESL Pro League, etc., etc. The two, there's a big difference there in terms of how you're going to approach each situation and each goal with the effort and the time put into it. So once you have your goals kind of in place, the first thing you need to do is find out how you like to in-game lead. Are you default heavy? Do you want your players to work the map under your direction, create openings for you to call off of? Or are you strat heavy? Do you want to throw set pieces most rounds and make utility your new best friend? The next thing you kind of want to figure out is whether you are explosive or passive. So if you're explosive, do you like fighting for space right away and exchanging utility with the opposing side? Sorry, it's a high risk, high reward type of style. Or are you passive, like 2020 Navi, where you walk onto a site with 20 seconds left on the clock? Ideally, and you'll see this with tier 1 IGLs and some tier 2 IGLs, is that they don't pigeonhole themselves into one type of calling. They're very diverse because each opponent and each game that you walk into is going to be different. That's what makes Counter-Strike incredible. Every game is going to play out differently. Not every round is going to play out the same. So you need to adapt as an in-game leader to different situations. You'll need to know when is the best time to run a default, or when is it a good time to run a set piece because you're kind of out of ideas and let's just throw something at this, and if it works, hey, maybe we can go into another default to see how the team has adjusted, etc., etc. Now, this is important because how you enjoy IGLing will dictate the kind of players that you are going to want to find. You aren't going to want a hyper-aggressive player on your team if they are going to ignore your game plans 8 out of 10 times in a default and fuck off and do what they want anyways. And likewise, you aren't going to want a super passive player if your style revolves around an aggressive default and getting early map control and exchanging a lot of util. Tying into that, let's talk about finding the right players. This is difficult to figure out, especially at the open levels, but essentially what you want to do is you want to cover the basics and fill the roles of the style you want to have. Are you default heavy? Then you're probably okay with a group of teammates who have a basic understanding of the game, timings, and a mechanical skill that is all relatively within the same level. A team that understands defaults and how to play around the map as a unit will almost always be more successful than a team that relies solely on out-of-spawn calls. What I want to do here is I want to draw a tier 1 example with ENCE. ENCE, when they had Spinks on the roster, was notorious. Snappy was notorious for doing set plays and set calls right out of spawn right away. And it revolved around making a lot of space for Spinks to get picks, to open the map, kind of to close out, etc. It all revolved around that one player. However, when Spinks went to Vitality, ENCE kind of fell apart because all of a sudden they didn't have that quote-unquote star player to open the map, close the map, etc. When you are in a set piece, you often have a very heavy reliance on 1 to 2 players, and that's sometimes a good thing because when they're on, they're really on, but if they leave, you're fucked. But that doesn't mean that strat heavy and set piece approach to IGLs is a poor approach. A fast-paced, strat-heavy team at the open level can often perform very well because honestly, what are you going to do if this is your first time as an IGL at the open level and you're up against a team who throws a full B execute on you on overpass with layered flashes, mollies, etc.? You're not going to do much. You're not going to know how to fight around that, and that's why it performs. That's why it does well at the lower levels, and especially as a new roster, because oftentimes you can catch a lot of opponents off guard. For the strat heavy approach, you usually need 1 to 2 players who are just a little bit better mechanically than you are or the rest of your team is. So whether that be 2 good riflers and you know what, maybe a supportive op, or 1 really good rifler and 1 really good op. And the rest of you have to be knowledgeable with utility, because what the 3 of you are going to do is you're going to throw utility for the opper and the entry rifler or the 2 riflers to create as much space for you as possible. When you're looking at the quote unquote ideal, it's nice to have a balance. Try to find a combination of players who all want to be on the same page. It's like, hey guys, you know what? This is kind of how we're going to play. This is how we're going to approach the game. These are our strats, etc. But what I mean by that is find a group of players where there isn't one clear liability, because where you have one clear liability, they are exploitable, and you'll see that happen in your matches if the enemy IGL is even remotely on a good brainwave. Alright, let's talk about figuring out the roles for a second, because this goes hand in hand with finding players. Roles are super important to the game and give the team direction without you even having to make a call, because your support players will always know to support your entry or your op and ensure that they are able to provide trade opportunities and set up easy kills for them, whether that be a default heavy setup or whether it be a set piece setup. Whereas your lurk, on the other hand, will understand that they need to catch timings and maintain pressure on the opposing side of the map to prevent rotations and stacks towards where you are going to. Alternatively, they can create openings themselves by catching one player off in a rotation, and all of a sudden you have a free bomb site to get into. However, it's very easy to get stuck into roles, so don't fall for that trap. Feel free to change it up, especially if you have a 5Q that is easily flexible. If you're trying out players and everyone is super flexible where they're going to play, then the onus is on you as an IGL and to have conversations with your teammates to see, you know what, where are you most comfortable? Where can I put you? And try them out in different areas. And if they perform really well, then that's great. And if they don't, that's okay. Don't just get the entry to be the entry because they can open up the map. Maybe, and this is an example from one of the videos that I've watched recently, and I'm going to use it here. Maybe the entry player would prefer to be a lurk, because when they're allowed to do things in their own time, they're going to open up the map for you like crazy, and all you have to do is keep the attention very far away from them or set them up like super late game. Going into that, you don't want to be pigeonholed because maybe your B anchor on Inferno feels better as being a pit player on A, or maybe your connector player on Mirage will feel better being the B anchor. You just have to find out what works for your players and kind of work around that. Kind of building on that, and what I should have said a little bit earlier, is you need to have an idea of what you are looking for in your system for what you are trying to get out of the players that you are trying out. So for example, if you are default heavy and you have an idea in your mind that you want 1 entry, 1 lurk, 2 supporters, 1 op, which is probably at the open level what you are going to want to do, then that kind of dictates how you are trying to try out players. It's super easy to get stuck in the roles, but genuinely, and I'm going to bring this up again because it is super important, don't feel like you have to be stuck in the role that you gave someone or that you are playing yourself. Switch it up, because adaptation is super important. Moving on, let's talk about expectations and setting a schedule. Now that you have a team and you have a rough idea of roles, it's time to talk about the expectations and scheduling. Let's be very clear. if you're watching this, you are in open and trying to make a new team for the season. You aren't getting paid to play CS, and you're very likely also having a life outside of the game, whether that be with a family, whether that be with work. Please do not stress about this part. There is no need for people to set a 5-day-a-week practice schedule for your team. That's kind of all I have to say about that. Now, let's have the expectations talk, because this is kind of important. Expectations and this conversation is super important to have with your team early on, because it kind of what it does is it sets a very good baseline in the team of, hey guys, you know what, we're only playing this season for fun. We're not really going to practice a whole ton. Maybe we run some scrims. Or, hey guys, you know what, I'm trying to make it to main. Here's kind of like what I'm hoping to do, etc., etc. Because the expectations, some people have stronger personalities than others. If you want to be the IGL and you have people talking over you, you need to set the expectation at the start of the season that that is not okay, and kind of build on that. And kind of the expectations also kind of goes into respect. Everyone respects each other on the team. Don't be assholes. Like, have that conversation. You're not trying to break each other down at the ESEA open level. For God's sakes, it's literally a step above face it pugs. Be nice to one another. It's really not hard to maintain a positive team environment and trying hard at the same time. Now, let's switch gears a little bit and go into practice. You don't have to have a 5-day-a-week practice schedule, because people, if your goal is to make it to IM or make it to main, they should be practicing on their own time alongside having the team practice. So let's talk about it. For solo practice, for example, you're working on your aim, utility, and demo review. This is all done on an individual's own time. Accountability is big in any team, and if your teammates don't want to put in that type of work and they're constantly missing utility, they're constantly not following what you're saying, you know what? Find a replacement that will. It's not worth your time to stress out about a teammate that doesn't want to perform if you're trying to get better. Reinforce to your team that they do not all have to be superstars. They just cannot consistently be underperforming relative to the remaining 4 players. For example, if you 4 are 80 ADR players and you have a teammate that's 60 ADR, one of 2 things is happening. That player is just not good, that player is not learning, or that player is not being put into positions that suit them. Try something else, swap the roles around, see if that helps before you have a conversation about, you know what, let's get rid of this guy because he sucks. Maybe the role you put him in isn't ideal. Team practice is getting into a Discord server and discussing what your expectations are. This can be general expectations at the start of the season, such as, hey guys, this is the type of IGL that I'm going to do. This is kind of what my expectations are for the season. Here's how I want us to practice, etc., etc. Once you start getting some time into the general season, you can start, or maybe a couple, a week or 2 before, you can start working on individual maps. For example, talk about positioning. If you have this set strat or this set default, this is how you want your teammates positioned. This is how you want them set up for trades. This is how you're going to scale up together. This is what your defaults are. These are the strats. Let's do some dry ones, etc., etc. Do that during the team practice, but genuinely don't practice 8 hours a day. That's not helpful for you. What I would recommend is doing this even 1 to 2 days per week where everyone is available. Just have, 1 hour, an hour and a half, 2 hours maximum. Just talk about what your expectations are, go over the maps, kind of break it down, teach your teammates because that's what you're going to do, but also be willing to learn. If someone has an opposing view to you, don't just immediately shut it down and say, I don't agree. Hear them out, because they might teach you something that you don't know. Going off of that, the bulk of the prep work for matches, etc. should be done by you, the in-game leader. So for example, your stratting, your etc. If you have someone else doing your stratting, you may as well almost not be an IGL in my book, so that's kind of a controversial opinion. I'm sure I'll hear some comments I'm sure I'll read some comments to talk about that, but I'm happy to discuss, put your ideas into the comment section, let's chat. So one of the next things that I want to talk about is scrims. Scrims are a tool to learn and build on what you're trying to teach to your roster. The goal of the scrim is not necessarily to win it, but to learn. During your scrims, your focus should be on 1 to 2 things the team needs to focus and improve on. To adapt to some sort of, you have the default set up, but it's just not quite working and we're trying to figure out why. Let's practice the defaults. Focusing, say for example, like as I said, the defaults or different defaults. For example, you shouldn't have, we're just going to run one single default the entire time because that becomes easy. Let's run a default where we go towards A. Let's run a default where we go towards mid. Let's run a default where we go towards B, etc. And kind of focus on that as a start. Same thing with strats. If you want to practice site executes, do that. Or if you want to practice force buys and half buys against gun rounds, you don't have to treat each scrim like a match. If you have $10,000, half buy, force buy, do something, buy MP9s, buy FAMASas, and see how, and pour utility, and see kind of how you are playing to adjust to the enemy style. Scrims are a big tool that can help, and honestly in ESEA, in North America at least, it's very hard for people to treat scrims as non-matches because that's kind of what people will do. So the goal of the scrim should be such that you walk away from it having learned something or something that you can improve on. Don't treat every single scrim like a mock match. That isn't helpful. You can definitely do that, but it doesn't allow you to focus on what your team needs to work on. Then, after the scrims, demo review and see what went well in your area of focus and what didn't go well. This way you have a clear idea and you can have a discussion with your teammate about what needs to improve and what is good, and kind of, as I said, have that discussion and work together to try to figure out how best to adjust your gameplay to fit your defaults, fit your strats, etc., etc. Maybe it's timings, maybe it's people don't know the utility. Break it down for them, and then you can work on it from there. All right, let's talk about match days, because the preparation you have done between your roles, scrims, team discussions, all leads you to the matches. Prior to the match, have a conversation again with your roster, anywhere from 30 to 60 minutes before the match, about what the game plan is going into the game. Say, hey boys, remember, let's win. Defaults, remind them of crucial things. Strats, remind them of crucial things. If you did some demo review of the enemy, let them know some crucial things to look out for. Make sure the vibes are good. Make sure everyone is on the same page and not negative. Then you let everyone warm up however they do. You play the match, and then after the match, regardless of the outcome, take a 5 to 10 minute break if you can, and then come back as a team and talk about what went right and what went wrong, similar to the scrims. If you are unable to do this post-match, set up a day where you can go over the demo and maybe a comms recording to see where improvements can be made. And that's kind of another thing that I want to touch on. When you are playing your matches, I would highly recommend, if you are capable of recording them without losing a lot of performance, to record your matches and your communication. Because very often you can spot easy to fix mistakes if you have the comms to back it up. If your two of your teammates are going somewhere and then one of them dies and he's like, bro, what the fuck? You can go back to that and you can pinpoint, well, you know what, you didn't actually comm to this guy that you were going to do that. So why would you expect him to kind of follow along with what you were doing? You know what I mean? So just make sure to keep those comms up next time. And they'll go, oh yeah, you know what, that makes sense. It's important to remember that regardless of the outcome, the matches are also an opportunity to learn how people react in real situations. If you start the season slow, that doesn't mean your roster is dead. It means you need to work as a team and don't give up. It's easy to get into your own heads, but if everyone is on the same page, there is no reason that the roster cannot stick together for at least 1 to 2 seasons. And I want to bring up Subi Peak here for an example. We didn't have a good first season. We stuck together, we tried working things out, and we also didn't have a good second season. And honestly, like, it's kind of shaky and up in the air whether or not we want to stick together for a third, because the kind of problems that we're having are just not problems that we can fix. So, it's still up in the air. So, but give your roster some time to work, because honestly, if it's just a couple of small minutia, it's easily adjustable. And then by the end of the second season, you should have a very good idea of what doesn't work and what changes need to be made. But then you at least have given it a fair shot. So let's talk about our concluding thoughts. Overall, the IGL role is the hardest role to play in the game. You have to keep track of so many things and make sure that everyone is on the same page. It is also it is the most important role, but it's also the most underappreciated. You will never see an IGL get the type of big coverage and big ups as you would an opper or an entry rifler, like say for example twists or simple. They're the ones that are always going to get the highlights, whereas you, the IGL, you're just in the background setting those types of players up. If you are willing to put in the work, it is definitely a rewarding role. You must have some dedication and a lot of patience in order to make it work. But if you are dedicated and do want to put in the work, it's super, super rewarding to have a call and win a round because of a decision you made in the game. Practice makes perfect. Just be open to learning, because as long as you're willing to learn and watch your own demos and watch the comms videos, you're going to learn different things. When you're starting out, mistakes will be made. You just have to be open to fixing them. And honestly, you never know who the next Kerrigan will be. Could be you. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I hope it was cohesive and you guys have a good understanding of the role and kind of just a very basic foundation. I don't think I'm going to go into a ton more detail in another video, only because I'm not at that type of level of IGLing yet. I'm still at this level. This is something that I'm working on a regular basis. So as we as I progress as an in-game leader and as you guys kind of follow me along the journey, you know what, maybe there will be a follow-up video for higher level IGLing. But for now, we leave it at ESEA Open, and hopefully within the next couple seasons, we'll be at ESEA Main and we can talk about it going forward. I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I'll catch you in the next one. Peace.